Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Well, hello again. I'm Pastor Chuck Lewis, and this is my wife.
I'm Barbara.
And we're just excited to be with you again today and talk about the subjects that affects all of us. And we've been talking about boundaries. And boy, boundaries are something that a lot of people like that word if they have them. But if they don't have them and they're boundary busted, it's like, wow, that word causes me a lot of conflict and problems and sometimes anger, huh?
Right.
So why don't we do a review of kind of what we covered about boundaries
Okay.
so far?
Yeah, since it's probably been a week since you've heard us talk about boundaries. A boundary is like a property line around your house. It shows where your property ends and someone else's begins. For your own personal life, it shows what you're responsible for or not responsible for. One way of saying it could be what's in your hula hoop and what is not. It can be personal space. It could be things that you will or will not do, what you're willing to put up with, allow in your life. So basically, it's just a property line around your life.
Mhm.
And the reason we need boundaries are to take care of us. They're not to get other people's approval. They're to take care of us and keep us safe, protect our emotions. You know, the Bible says, above all, guard your heart, because out of it flow the issues of life. And so we do need to guard our heart. We need to be careful about what we watch or what we listen to. So that's kind of a summary of boundaries. And what did you think of anything that I didn't say or forgot?
I think that covered it very well because
Okay.
I've heard it said that people that have boundaries are the least angry of all people.
Right.
And boy, are we living in an angry world right now. I mean, I run into people that are so angry about everything in traffic and just it doesn't take much to set people off.
That's true.
And that lets me know that they're a boundary buster or a boundary busted person. And the more we have our boundaries busted, the angrier we get.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good indication of a boundary has been violated if we are experiencing anger or resentment. We need to look at what's causing that.
Yeah, so it's not about trying to control everybody so that we're not angry or we're not getting a boundary busted. It's about us taking responsibility for us and what we need to do to draw a good boundary. So, you know, we're going to talk today about boundaries at work. And, you know, if there's people at work that's really bothering you and you enjoy your job, except for these certain people that are there, and you're just wishing that they would get fired or go somewhere else or go to Siberia or something. And, you know, but you can't seem to get rid of them. So, you know, when you set boundaries with people at work, give us an example of that.
Well, if you have someone that is really difficult to get along with, but you see them as the problem that needs to be fixed,
Yeah,
then you give them your personal power.
right.
But if you see that yourself, you are the only person that you can change. So you can change your attitude. You can change how you respond to that person. You can limit your time with them if at all possible. That may or may not be possible. But when you look at what you can do to change the situation, then you have power over that. And you have options. Like you can go to that person that's causing the problem and talk to them about it. If that doesn't work, you can use your grievance policy at work. You can excuse me, talk to your employer about it. But you do have options. You need to not see yourself as a victim, that you
Mm.
can't do anything about this person, because
Right.
you do have choices about how you handle what they do.
So if we have boundaries, that doesn't make us a martyr.
Right.
And that doesn't make us a victim. It's like, oh, well, wait a second. I heard the pastor just preach about how we need to turn the other cheek and just take abuse type thing. That's what sometimes turning the other cheek. That's what that interprets.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe God wants us to be a victim, and He doesn't want us to be a martyr and feel like, I hate it, but I can't do anything about it. You can.
Yeah.
You can walk away. You can. The minute somebody gets disrespectful with
Mm-hmm.
you can always walk away. It's hard to walk away if that's your boss, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay to say, even to a boss, I can hear that a lot better if you tell it to me respectfully. That's not being abusive. That's just standing up. Now that's not a guarantee they're going to do it, but at least you're voicing what
Yeah.
you would like, to have better.
Yeah, and that's important, to have a voice. And if you don't say anything, things definitely aren't going to get better. But if you at least talk about it, there's the chance that it could get better.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say, "Well, I hate the way you're treating me," or "I hate the way you're talking to me," and all that. But
Mm.
God gave us a voice. One of the biggest, or the first assignment God gave Adam, it was to name all the animals. So that in the garden, and that lets me know that God cares about us having a voice.
Right.
Or why would He tell Adam to name them?
Mm-hmm.
See, so our voice is important to the Lord, and otherwise we're just silent, and we're taking all this stuff in, and we become like a big tank full of just toxic
Right.
stuff, and it's going to come out somewhere.
It will, and I did have an experience like that, where I was afraid to talk to, a person that I worked with about how they were affecting me. And you really helped. You really encouraged me to go ahead and talk to that person about it. I was very afraid of anger because of things I experienced as a kid. Um, but you really encouraged me constantly. I needed a lot of encouragement to confront this person, it was my employer, about how they were treating me and how that was affecting me. And every time I confronted him, it got better. So that work relationship continued to get better as I continued to have a voice and say how what was happening was affecting me, how I would like it to be better or different. And one thing I think is good, if you're going to talk to an employer about your work experience, is I would first tell them everything that you like about the job. Start out with something positive. Here's what's really good about this job. This is what I'm enjoying. This is what is
good.
great. But here's something that is hard for me, or that I would like to be better or different. And is there anything that we could do about this? Let's talk about what options there are to change this.
Yeah, so you don't have to exchange toxic with toxic.
Right. Right.
What's that saying you say all the time? Just be kind.
Yeah, just be kind all the time, no matter what.
No matter what.
Doesn't matter how you feel or what the other person is doing, you're responsible to handle your own part in a godly way. And I think it's important too, when you start a job, find out what the expectations are.
7
a.m. When I worked in the field of accounting and taxes, and most accounting positions or tax positions do require overtime during tax season. So know what those requirements are. But if you're working a lot of overtime and it wasn't part of the job description, or it goes on forever, there's no limit to it, it's your responsibility when you're not happy with work. It's no one else's responsibility. People cannot read your mind. If you're unhappy with a situation at work, it is your responsibility to do something about it. And so you're the one that needs to take action and talk about. I remember I used to complain about my job a lot. And you asked me one time, what would you like to do, or what would you like to be better or different? And I said, well, I really like what I do. I just don't like doing it nights and weekends.
Right.
And so you really encouraged me to talk to my employer about that. And I did, even though I was afraid to. I was afraid I would get fired, but I didn't. And he ended up hiring someone to do the work I could not do on nights and weekends. So
when you drew the boundary.
When I drew the boundary,
Yeah,
yes, I remember telling him I can work these hours. And I remember him asking me several times, are you asking me or are you telling me? And I said, I'm just letting you know that these are the hours that I can work. I understand if it doesn't work for you and you need to hire someone else, but this is what I'm able to do at this time. And so it ended up that I had a job that I enjoyed, doing work I enjoyed doing it within the hours that I was willing to do it. So if I had never said anything, I would have continued to be angry, but it would have been no one's fault but my own, because your employer doesn't know you're unhappy about it unless you talk to them.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a week or 2 weeks. This
Yeah,
had gone on for a long, long time.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's not drawing a boundary and using it as a weapon.
Right.
It's like, oh, you expect me to work when I come to work? No, that violates my boundary. I don't work when I come to work. I play when I come to work. See, that's not a boundary. These tools and skills are not used to be as a weapon or used in a dysfunctional way. They're used to help the situation out
Right.
and make it a better place to work, to where you'll be excited about getting up in the morning and going to work. Boy, if you don't have boundaries, you're not excited about it. Life in general, you're not very excited about it.
Right.
And another thing I think we need to talk about, Barb, in the time we have left, is how important it is to not turn into a workaholic.
Right.
Because some people just don't know how to draw the boundary, and they're maybe in the people pleasing and just trying to, a crowd, 8 hours into, 12 hours into 8 or 15 hours into 8.
Right.
And it's just not working, and you're burning yourself out. I remember being a chaplain in the hospital one time, and I told this guy came in on a gurney, and he'd had a major heart attack. And I told him, as I was praying with him, I said, you don't have to die to draw a boundary. And he said, wow, I've never thought of it that way. I said, yeah, you're working yourself to death, and you're probably trying to work every moment of your waking hours. And he says, yeah, I get about 3 or 4 hours sleep a night. And it turned into a full-blown heart attack. And I said, well, you can draw a boundary. I can teach you how to draw boundaries without dying. And and he got excited because he'd never heard that concept before.
Right.
So, being a workaholic is our choice, and you could feel a lot of pressure from other employees or your employer to become an I started to say alcoholic. You could turn it into an alcoholic as well, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to go that road. If your boss is a workaholic, that doesn't mean you have to be one.
Right.
But you can set your boundaries and say, look, I really enjoy working here. And I like what you said about starting out with something positive. Talk about what's right with the job. Tell your boss what you enjoy about working there, and then try to establish a boundary. Now, it's going to take work. It's going to take time, because maybe your boss has never heard the word boundaries by anybody. Maybe his family doesn't draw boundaries either, or her family.
Right.
But you can still be the one to introduce the boundary. Now, I would love to say everything's going to work out fine if you do that, but sometimes it won't. Sometimes you can lose your job. That could happen. But at least when you voice what you need, that's reasonable again, and that's the key word. It has to be reasonable. You can't say, well, I work 8 hours a day, but I want to work for 2 hours and I want you to pay me for 8 hours. No,
Right.
no, that's not realistic. But set up realistic boundaries for you and present them, and maybe pray about it, and God, ask God for favor, and you'll be
That's
amazed
good.
at what the Lord can set up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's so important to communicate. Um, what can keep people from setting those boundaries, though, we have the internal conflict of fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of experiencing a loss if we do have the courage to set the boundary. And that's what keeps us from, we have our own internal conflict besides other people objecting to our boundaries. But it's again, it's to take care of yourself. One thing Chuck taught me, when we would do ministry, we would go to the hospital, and one day we worked all day with a family who experienced the loss of the father and husband. He went to work one day. He passed away that day, unexpectedly.
And he was a young man. He wasn't
Right.
old, but he was burning himself out, and he
Yeah.
literally had a major heart attack and died on the job.
Right. And when we left, I remember feeling so sad. And you said it's really hard to close the door on it, isn't it? He said, Chuck told me that what he did as a chaplain, when he would leave the hospital, he would wait and hear the door close behind him. And that was his signal to himself to leave it there,
Yes.
because it didn't help to come home and take it out on the family, because something terrible happened at the hospital that day, which wasn't their fault or that they had any responsibility in. But since you were sad, or I was sad over what happened, we were taking it home. So it really helped me to be able to leave it there. And you can do the same thing with work.
Yeah.
Leave it at work. Don't bring it home and take it out on everybody.
That's right. I mean, the dynamics are there on a lot of different jobs. Maybe you're listening to this and say, well, my job's so dynamic. Maybe you're a first responder. Maybe you're, in situations where you're seeing a lot of death and potential of death. And so you've got to be able to draw a boundary on that. And the way you draw a boundary on that is you begin to debrief about it. You talk about it with somebody.
With a safe person.
Yeah, and not somebody that's going to put your feelings down or say, well, you need to put a rubber band around your head and snap out of it or whatever. You need to talk to somebody that's got empathy and understanding and debrief about that. When I was a chaplain for the police department, I would get in the cruiser to go out on a 4 and 5 hour ride along, and I'd be with the officer sometimes all night long, because he or she would start debriefing about something, and they didn't want to take me back to the station because it felt so good to debrief. And that's so important. I've heard it said that our body is like a tank and our mouth is the release valve. So you talk about it and get that stuff out, and it's amazing. So it's really drawing a boundary on drama and trauma. You've got to close the door on it, like you're saying.
But have a safe place to release it.
Got to have that.
Yeah.
Got to have
To
it.
talk to someone about it.
Talk to your pastor. Talk to a counselor. Talk to somebody, maybe a relative that really has a good ability to listen and not put you down for your feelings, but to really hear you and validate you. Yeah. And ask the Lord to send you somebody, that has that ability to do that. Yeah. So when you draw a boundary at work or anywhere, your life is going to feel more empowered. You're not going to feel like a victim anymore. You're not going to feel like people are abusing you anymore, because that's one of the worst feelings in the world. And we're encouraging you to stand up with the strength of the Lord and say, God, I feel like I'm going to pass out to face this, but He can enable you and give you the power to stand up against the opposition and stand against the abusive stuff that's going on, even in yourself.
Yeah.
There might be abusive things that you're doing to you that you need to stand up to you and draw a boundary and say, I am not going to do that anymore with the help of the Lord.
Right. And you still want to do the very best job you can.
Yes.
While you're at work, do a good job as unto the Lord.
Do the best job
We're
you
just
can.
talking about doing self-care, doing a good job, but having balance.
Absolutely. Well, we have to close today, but there's so much more we could say about this. If you want to write a comment in on a certain situation that you're facing on this program, put your comments there and we'll try to address them. God bless you today. It's been good to be with you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.